Well, it's Talk Birdie to me. We love a bonus podcast. And here's another one. Massive thanks to our mates at the Golf Clearance Outlet who beat everyone's prices, and Ping, who, like they've done for Nick O'Hearn, they'll help you play your best. And the Watch My Numbers app. Play smarter and use your data. Now, a bonus episode of Talk Birdie to me. Here's Nick O'Hearn and Mark Allen.
So, I love Smartless, and I've been thinking about all these bonus pods.
Yeah.
I don't want to do exactly what they do and make you guess because it's ridiculous because I know you both know who we're talking to. But I would like to go through some of his achievements.
Please.
So, our guest today was a bloody good player. At one stage in the Australian Masters, I think he bogeyed the first, birdied 10 of the next 14 holes to be 9 under par after 15, had a chance of winning the Australian Masters. It didn't turn out that way, but Stevie could play. Almost gave me away. He coached Ian Baker-Finch in the 1993 Australian Open win. He'd been coaching him for a long time. He basically set up the Victorian Institute of Sport before there was an Institute of Sport anywhere in the country. He was a lot to do with Allenby and Appleby, two enormous names in Australian golf. He also coached a bloke called Nick Flanagan, who was at the time the second youngest winner of the US Amateur Championship. He also coached one of my heroes, KJ Choi. His name is Steve Bann. He's one of the great coaches in sport that this country has ever produced. And he's been good enough to join us on Talk Birdie to me. Welcome, Stevie.
Oh, thanks, guys. Well, what an intro. Good on you, Marco.
Did I miss anything?
No. Probably added a couple of things.
Yeah. Well, I was waiting for him to say also a budding rock star as well, because I think you were right into your music early on and we're going to take that path. Is that right, Steve?
Yeah, well, that's true. But then when I found out that they used to turn my microphone off on the backing vocals, I thought perhaps that wasn't the best way to go.
Well, the first time I met you, I was maybe 11 years old. Mum and Dad were members at Huntingdale Golf Club. They used to bring my brother and I down in our footy shorts.
Yep.
I remember seeing you hit a few shots off the first tee. I think you played in front of us. And I just could not believe how far you could hit the ball. And you were doing it with an earring in your ear. And now it all makes sense because I didn't realise you were in a rock band, Stevie. So that now makes plenty of sense. But how when you first started playing before you got into the coaching, how serious? I mean, did you have grand plans of getting to the US tour, or winning in Europe, or what was your outlook back then?
Look, yes, I did. Yeah, but I actually gave up golf for a couple of years, from 17 to nearly 19, for my music, which was a terrible decision. But fortunately, I got back into it, and I had a few lessons off Jeff Flanagan, and I started playing pennant at Riversdale. They got me back there playing some pennant, and then I realised that golf was where I wanted to spend the rest of my life. And I started my traineeship with Jeff about 6 or 7 months after that, and that was a great turning point.
Yeah, well, you've coached some amazing players over your career. I mean, Mark sort of mentioned some of them: Allenby, Appleby, Flanagan, KJ. But I think the one that really stands out for me would have been Ian Baker-Finch when he won the Open Championship in Royal Birkdale. You didn't say that in your intro there, Mark, by the way. You said 93 Australian Open, I think.
I did say the Australian Open.
Yeah, he might have won a bigger tournament. So
apologies.
Yeah, well, I think. Well, look, I mean, the thing with Ian, like we helped each other. We shared the house. I stayed in the house with him when he won in '91 at Birkdale. I had a team of Institute of Sport players over there: Rob Allenby, John Wade, Paul Maloney, Glenn Joyner, and we were all over there trying to qualify. Rob actually did qualify, and I stayed in the house that week with Ian. But Ian and I have been great mates. I mean, we did the honours at each other's weddings over 40 years ago, so it was very much a mutual thing. And I'd like to help Ian out a little bit. He'd help me out a bit, and it was more of a buddy thing.
Yeah, and that week, did you have a feeling that Finchy was just on song, or was it just a slow sort of, as the week went on, he just got better and better, or did you just sort of know from the start, okay, this is his?
Look, I think everybody had a feeling. A lot of the players, I think Nick Price actually put money on him to win, but He'd actually had a great run. He just lost a 7-hole playoff in Milwaukee, it might have been, the week before, a couple of weeks before, and he had 2 or 3 seconds, and he was just in great form. And so I mean, it was pretty amazing. And that front nine on Sunday was something special.
So, tell us about. I mean, I'm really curious to get into your head and learn a little bit how coaching has evolved in your days in golf. What are some of the things that you were working on with Ian Baker-Finch? I mean, I know the video came along. You know, you and Dale Lynch pretty much were the first in this country to bring the video into play. But what sort of things were you working on with Finchy to get his game in order?
Look, there was more about whenever we worked. It was more about hitting shots, and look, the great turning point for Ian was in about '83. He spent a summer down at Sorrento with Peter Thomson, and Peter Thomson actually, even though he said he really didn't have much idea about the technique of the golf swing, completely rearranged Ian's swing. He had a high arm action, slidey hips, and he used to hit these big high cuts, and then after that summer he spent with Peter Thomson, he'd set himself a goal that he wanted to win the British Open at much lower arm action, more around his body, and he could hit the ball low. So we most of the time when we practiced and worked together, it was about, let's see, what have we got to do to figure out how to hit this shot? And, different slopes and lies and shot shapes and trajectories, and it was more about trying to get better at playing the game.
What about his putting, Benny? I mean, when he spoke about putting, everybody in the room listened. I remember when I was a kid, I reckon I was at the Victorian Institute of Sport with you and Dale Lynch there, and I reckon you guys were telling me to use my shoulders, and I never used my shoulders. I didn't think it worked. But I went to Finchy one day and said, "Hey, Finchy, what should I do?" He goes, "Use your shoulders." And of course, I used my shoulders from that point forward because it came out of his mouth. What was it like just getting a grandstand view to that putting stroke for a long time?
Oh, look, he was, I mean, he look, and still is, he's just a brilliant putter. And, we had a couple of hits around the Furrows when he was in Australia, earlier in the year, and he's still just silky. Every time I made a birdie, he said it right on top of you and just rolled it in. So that hasn't changed. But one thing that really strikes me with him, we were having a practice round for a New South Wales Open one year, and Ian wasn't making any putts. And he said, "I know what it is, I'm aiming again." I said, "What?" He said, "Yeah, I'm aiming again." I said, "Well, how are you supposed to make a putt if you don't aim?" He said, "No, you've got to stop aiming, you've got to stop looking at the putter. You've just got to see the line, feel it, and your hands know where it is." So I knew how far away I was from genius right at that point.
Yeah, he was a genius too. I remember he gave me a great little putting tip with the coin drill where you put the coin behind the ball and you hit 3-4 foot putts and you never see the ball go in. You're just looking at that coin because he was one of the best at keeping his head down. And I think there was a period he said, "Look, I never actually saw a 3-foot putt go in. I just listened for it to go in." Yeah, he was brilliant at that sort of stuff. Now, Steve, you sort of, I guess, well, you didn't start it, but you're with the Victorian Institute of Sport and obviously developed the golf program there. Can you tell us a little bit about the early sort of days that you were there at the Institute of Sport?
Look, yeah, well, I mean, we were basically, Dale Lynch and I were pretty much given just a charter of just, create a program that's going to give young guys and girls the best opportunity to be able to play and compete at an international level. So, at that stage, we didn't know much about the sciences of where golf's gone, in the last 30 or so years, but we just tried to create a competitive environment. So every day that the young guys and girls came to practice, it was all about competition. And I just based that on, I started in the early 80s on the Troppo Tour up in Queensland with you guys obviously know all about it. Everyone's had a crack at Troppo, but I played on Troppo with Ian Baker-Finch, Peter Senior, Wayne Grady, Peter Fowler, Peter McQuinney, and we're all kids. And of course, you look back now and you think, geez, two of those guys won a major, and Peter won, Peter Senior won Australia's, 3 biggest events after the age of 50. I mean, so everything that I understood about if you want to compete at the high level, you've got to compete at something every day. And then that's And that's what we tried to create at the Institute of Sport. And I think, most of those guys came out and, we'd spend a fair bit of time on technique. But once we're pretty happy with that, it was all about just compete, just learn to compete.
I want to talk about Allenby a little bit later because we might do that after the break, Stevie. But Stuart Appleby, I remember when Stuart Appleby rocked into that Victorian Institute of Sport, he was breaking records, not with his golf game, but with his natural strength in the gym. Can you remember just some of the stuff that he was doing and some of the other guys, just the ability just to walk in and almost be a footballer? He was that strong.
Yeah, well, I mean, he did play full forward for Kahuna in and I think in the under-18s and maybe even the under-19s before he came down. It was super strong legs, Stuart. And he's still, he's 53 now, and he's still in the gym every day and as strong as can be. But natural strong. His dad, Mel's, strong guy, grew up on a farm and, just every day working with the hands and just that natural, raw strength. It was a huge advantage.
So what was it like working with someone like him? Just raw ability, country boy strength. I think he won a Queensland Open as an amateur and then, pretty got started really quickly on the US Tour. And I think at one stage he was a top 10 all-time earner on the PGA Tour at one stage. What was it like working with Stuart?
Well, I think when he finished on the main tour, he was top 30 all-time money, so it's still not far off that. I think it was about 30 million he won. It was a pretty handy career, but look, if you told Stuart to do something 10 times, he'd do it 20, and he's just always been, like that. The hardest worker, I was the last person to leave the range for years on the US Tour because it was probably there was normally three people left on the range. It was Stuart, KJ, and VJ. We were, it was just like that for years.
Yeah, I used to see that a lot at Isleworth because I lived around the corner from him and you would have, we saw each other there quite often because you'd be over there visiting him and to watch you guys work on the range was something special because Stewie just hit ball after ball after ball until he got it right, and even when he didn't get it right, it didn't matter. He just continued to always look to improve. I guess another question I kind of have for you, Steve, is when you're working with such elite golfers like tour pros, what's the difference with them compared to your average golfer? I know that you teach at Kingston Heath a little bit, so you get some, obviously, 18 handicappers and higher. I mean, do you work in them a little different to the tour pro, or is it much of a similar sort of philosophy?
Look, it's obviously different, but with working with tour pros, it's about trying to find that edge, that, what can we do to help separate ourselves from the field, so we're constantly analysing stats and saying, well, if I can hit this shot, I reckon I can pick up a couple of shots on the field in a 4-round tournament, whereas, their club golfers, recreational golfers is most of the time the biggest enjoyment club golfers, recreational golfers get is if they can hit the ball solid. Just hit it solid, out of the middle of the club. In fact, most times people don't care where it goes as long as they hit it in the middle of the club. So it is. I mean, it's just that beautiful feeling, obviously, the resonance of that ball, the sound coming off the club face is, it's pretty engaging. But most of the time, recreational golfers, they just want to hit it better and be a bit more consistent. And, tour pros, they want to be able to beat the rest of the field.
What about Nick Flanagan when he marched in the CU, Steve? What was that like the first time you saw Nick? Because I remember watching his golf swing, and he's only a little fella, short in stature, and he doesn't look like the strongest kid you'd ever seen. But my God, some of the distances he was hitting with a very simple golf swing. What was it like working with him when you talk about raw talent?
Well, the amazing thing with Nick was he didn't really get serious at golf till he was 13 or 14, and he won the US Amateur at 19. But his background was he raced BMX, he played state-level soccer, he surfed every day. So all of the agility, power, probably the nerve, doing BMX stuff, and so the physicality and the competitive side was already there. So it just and he just had a naturally really good swing, but explosive speed for a little guy. You're right. He used to really smoke it, and he's fierce competitor again. All he wanted to do once the game was on, really hard on himself, but hard on his competitors as well.
Well, I know you listen to the podcast, Steve, and in all of our potties, we have a front nine and a back nine. It's time to go get yourself a little, I don't know, Pepsi Max or something, Stevie. I'm going to get a dim sim, and Nick's going to have a juice of some kind, and we'll see you on the 10th tee.
Right, I see you guys.
Thanks for listening to Talk Birdie, Simi. And if you're up for it, we'd love you to subscribe, rate and share the podcast wherever you listen. And thanks to our great partners who make the show possible, Ping, they'll help you play your best. Watch My Numbers, the most powerful database golf app in the world. And the Golf Clearance Outlet. They beat everyone's prices. Now, back to Nick O'Hearn and Mark Allen.
I want to hear some stories, the Allenby stuff, mate. We've saved it to last, alrighty?
And a bit of KJ too.
And a bit of KJ as well. And a little bit of I want to hear a little bit of Finchy as well. What happened? What got into his head? Yeah, anyway. What got into his head? I think
we'll start with Allenby.
We'd like to get your view on that as well.
Okay.
Our special guest is Steve Bann, and he's one of the best golf coaches in this country, if not the world. He's got a list of majors with Ian Baker-Finch, the 91 Open Championship. He's also had a major win of sorts with the US Amateur with Nick Flanagan. So a couple there that are easy to talk about. We want to hear about Robert Allenby, Steve. And the reason we want to hear about Robert Allenby is because I reckon he's one of the best hitters of a golf ball the world has ever seen. I also remember when he first came out, Nick, and I reckon you do too. Before he became the greatest hitter of a golf ball the world had ever seen, he was the best putter.
He was. That
we had ever seen. Now, we understand Rob. You know, he's raised eyebrows. I'll put it that way in his life and in his career. But Stevie, you had a front row seat to this amazing golfer that was Robert Allenby. Tell us how you met and tell us how you got started.
Well, my dad used to play down at East Malvern, and when he came home a few times, this was while I was still playing, he said, I played with this guy, Don Allenby. His son, he's about 7 or 8, and he said, you want to see him hit a golf ball? So the first I heard of Rob was my dad used to play with Rob's dad at East Malvern. When I started as a club pro in Box Hill in 1985, and Rob was just joined as a 14-year-old member. So it started from there. So I was the club pro at Box Hill, and Rob was a 14-year-old member.
So what did you think the first time you saw him hit a ball?
Yeah, I mean, he was just an absolute rake. He was a weed, but he used to sort of wind himself up, and probably 14, it was still very, very loose, but 15 he started to get a little bit of strength, and then by 16 he was just absolutely striping it. But I remember I was about 15, when he was about 15, Robert used to turn his head towards the target halfway in the downswing. He looked like he was looking at the target when he hit the ball, and his body was way open at impact. And I actually thought, I'm going to see if I can get to keep his head down a little bit, keep his eyes down. Well, that lasted about 5 minutes. As the moment I said, keep your eyes down, keep your head down, he started hitting 6 inches behind the ball. And then I thought, well, I need to let this kid go, because when he does that, and of course, you know, as the years went by, we saw obviously Amicus Sorensen, Duval, and most players rotate their head a little bit forward. But Robert used to do it because when he was 7-year-old using his dad's club in wintertime, the fairways were so muddy at East Malvern that he used to actually turn his face away from stop the mud splashing in his face. I think that's how he developed that move. But of course, the body release, now people that buy that body release said the club was just so stable through impact, and there was no flippiness at all, and that's why he was just such a great ball striker.
Yeah, I played with Robert a lot, and the one thing I always noticed about him was he just had this beautiful high draw with all the clubs through the bag. Now, is it true that whenever he used to get that turning into a bit of a hook, your way that you showed him to get rid of that was just to go there and hit fades? Is that right?
Well, we used to hit all shots, and we used to pick windows and try to hit through windows, under trees, around trees, over trees, and Robert could hit every shot. If you asked him to hit a fade, he could hit a fade. But that he's preferred the way he always saw it. Like Pennsylvania was probably the best example of that. I can't remember what hole it was. It was late on the back nine, Pennsylvania. He's coming down the stretch against Rocco Mediate. There's this island green. And during the practice rounds, we thought the pin's going to be right, front right on this island green for sure last day. So we're practicing these fades, hitting it up the middle of the green and just fading it a little bit. And, see if we can get it in there somewhere sort of 15, 20 foot left of the pin. Come Sunday, Robert starts at 20 feet out over the water. It's this big high draw into about 8 feet and makes the putt and goes on and wins the tournament. So, even when it came right down to it, he knew he could hit that shot, but no, I'm going with the draw.
Well, look, I want to hear your front row seat, the most impressive thing you ever saw him do, because I had a front row seat twice for Robert Allenby. Once was at an Australian PGA, and it was a windy day, and it was on the driving range, and he was hitting 2 irons straight into the teeth of this, I'm going to say, a 6 or 7 club wind.
Wow.
Yep.
And it was the most amazing stripe show I've ever seen. In fact, at one stage, I reckon half the players on the range were just watching one bloke hit balls, Steve.
Yeah.
And I reckon you might even remember that day.
Yeah.
It was just... It was so ridiculous what the sound and the noise and the flight.
Yeah,
it was hard to comprehend. The other one was we were in the last group together in the third round of a Johnny Walker Classic at Royal Melbourne. So I shot 70-66 at Royal Melbourne Composite. He had shot 68-66, and the Saturday in 1992 at Royal Melbourne was one of those horrific northerly wind, rotten days.
Rock hard.
Yeah.
Rock hard greens. And I reckon I shot 76. Might have even shot 77. I can't even remember. And he shot 66. And it was like the ball didn't know that it was a windy day.
Yep.
And my caddy and I, we just couldn't believe the control that he had at Royal Melbourne on it was really hot. I'm going to say a 6 club wind day, and the ease at which he shot the 66 in round 3, went on to win the tournament, was something that I will never forget as long as I live, Steve. Now, you must have seen some ridiculous days of striking as well.
Oh, look, he's a great ball striker, but Robert's record, and I think it is the record, of the sudden death playoffs, and these were in big events, European Tour events, US Tour events. He was 9 from 9. And the shots that he hit in playoffs were just incredible shots. And I think the 3-wood that he hit, it was about 50 degrees Fahrenheit. It was freezing cold into it. Started off as a 6-man playoff at in LA and Riviera. The 3-wood that he hit in to about 6 feet, and then made the putt to win that playoff. And I can't remember who was left. I think it was Davis Love was left. I can't even remember who was left, but that's probably the greatest shot I ever saw him hit.
Unreal.
He was impressive, that's for sure. And another guy you coached who was impressive, Choi. You mentioned his work ethic and how good he was, but he just seemed like a metronome, that guy, a machine. What was he like to be around? Because his pidgin English was always interesting.
He understands English much better than he speaks, but KJ was brilliant. KJ was nearly, he was 15 or 16 before he even actually started playing golf.
Mm.
And
he was a power lifter, right?
He was a power lifter, yeah, and he grew up in Wando Island, and there was no golf course or range. And the story, the way I understand it, was his gym teacher said to him at the start of the year, KJ, you're doing golf this year. And he said to the boy next to him, he said, what's golf? And gave them Jack Nicklaus My Way, translated into Korean, and obviously, and then a bucket of balls in this 7-iron. And KJ talks about he hit this 7-iron that came out of the middle of the club, and that was it. He was just infatuated with golf and just fell in love with it. But because there was no range or I don't think so many great players come from some kind of difficulty, not necessarily adversity, but KJ used to hit balls off the clay tennis court, draw a line on the clay tennis court and just hit ball after ball after ball, making sure he hit the ball before he hit the line. When the tide was in and when the tide was out, he'd do the same on the beach with the ball below his feet and then above his feet. And, that's he never missed a shot. He probably hits it more in the middle than anybody that I've ever worked with the scene, even more than Robert.
Unbelievable. I know that, like, you mightn't have heard this story, Nick, but I won that much money on KJ Choi betting on him. It wasn't funny. And it was all because I saw Steve one summer, and Steve said that he'd been working with KJ and he'd done a lot of work to his golf swing, and he'd worked night and day. And in Hawaii, after all that work and a rearrangement of the way he swung the golf club, he came second to anything else.
Wow.
And I thought to myself, are you kidding me? He's transformed his golf swing, and he's gone out and come second in basically the first tournament. So every week there was no respect for KJ Choi. He was at 80-1 every single week. So I just kept on putting 100 on him.
Yeah.
100 on him. 100 on him every single week. You know, winning about 4 times in 2 years, Steve, and I paid. I got my deposit to the house because of it. It was unbelievable.
It actually helped me pay for my deposit as well too, mate. That was good. It was good all round.
And just to finally to talk about Ian Baker-Finch, because he was a hell of a golfer. I think he got to number 7 or 8 in the world after winning that Open Championship.
Yeah.
But then famously lost his way. From your point of view, what happened?
Look, I think Ian started striving for distance and wanted to be a better driver and better ball striker. It's one of those things that, we're always guessing. Everyone thinks, I don't know, if it just, but all of a sudden he just couldn't hit it off the tee in particular. He never lost his short game. But once he started driving it really badly, he hit driver. The only time Ian wouldn't hit driver up until that started to happen to him was if there was something at the end of the fairway. Didn't matter. Even that last round of that British Open, it was a par 5, about 15 at Birkdale, and he just striped it up between the bunkers where everyone else was laying up short. But he just lost the driver. But most people that take his career after that British Open, he won an Australian PGA. He finished about 6th in the Masters, finished 2nd in the Players' Championship. So most people that just take his career after that. But it was about really from 94, 95 on where he just lost his nerve with the driver, and I think Ian wouldn't mind me saying that. But even when we play socially these days, he can hit every fairway. But so somewhere along the way, the nervous system decided that he wasn't going to let him hit drivers anymore.
Nick, I'm so lucky that Stephen Bann teaches at Kingston Heath.
Certainly are.
He's one of the great coaches. And I'll say this: he obviously comes with my highest recommendation. But I'd been struggling with my swing, consistently flipping over. I didn't know what was going on. I did a masterclass not so long ago about landing closed.
Landing closed, I remember it.
Landing closed was all Stephen Bann. And Stephen Bann, he just looked over my shoulder one day as I was looking at my swing, and we had a 5-minute chat that turned into a 15-minute chat. And Steve, I'm so happy with where my swing is at. And it was just a look. And the most amazing thing is, anybody who's listening to this can call Kingston Heath and book a lesson with one of the great golf coaches that this country has ever seen.
Yeah, for sure. And funnily enough, a while ago, my wife Alana, we were talking about her game, and I'm trying to help her out with swing, and I'm not a technical sort of person, and we were talking about who should she go see. I said, well, let's go see Banny.
Yeah.
And sure enough, Banny, you gave my wife a lesson, and she's been striping it ever since, so it's great. Thanks, mate.
Oh, no, she smashes it.
She does. She gives it a rip, and I hope she doesn't hit it much further because it's going to go past me pretty soon, I would say.
Hey, Steve, your life in golf has been an absolute belter. I mean, really, when you're from the outside looking in, we've always admired you. The people you've worked with have only ever had wonderful, wonderful things to say about you. And probably the nicest thing I can say about you, Steve, is when you're not in the room, I have never heard anyone say a bad word about you. You're a superstar of Australian golf, and thanks for coming on our podcast.
Oh, look, thanks very much, Mark, and thanks, Nick. Look, it's a pleasure having a chat, and I'll see you down the Heath.
See you at the Heath.
Thanks, Steve. Cheers, mate.
Good on you, mate. I'll see you down there.
There you go.
Thanks for being part of Talk Birdie to me with Nick O'Hearn and Mark Allen. And if you want to be part of the show, drop us a message or comment on the socials. Or you can send an email or leave a voicemail at talkbirdietome.com.au. Thanks to the great team at Ping. They're the best in the business and they'll help you play your best. And the Golf Clearance Outlet. If you're after top quality at prices you won't beat, check them out. golfclearanceoutlet.com.au. Talk Birdie to me's executive producer is Dan Bradley at Kaizen Media. Sound design, Daryl Misson at loudzebra.com.